Do you know what time it is? It's National Poetry Month, mother lovers. That's right, we are here for another National Poetry Month, a poetry discussion every day of the month in April. Welcome to Strip Cover Lip. My name is Adrian Fort, and we are here for a TBR for the month of April, which happens to be National Poetry Month. Now, if you check the description below, there will also be an enumerated list of the poetry discussions we will be getting this coming month. We will be having this coming month. We will be sharing this coming month right below where I list the link to my personal channel. And if you're not over there yet, that is where I talk about philosophy, I talk about general ideas, I talk about movies, I talk about a whole host of different things. And I'm going to be posting 5 videos on that channel this month as well, so make sure you follow me over there if you have any interest in those types of topics. And I know that what's in front of you is not quite so easy on the eyes. It is very difficult it's difficult for me. I'm something of a Luddite. It is difficult for me to find an editable sort of calendar. I don't know why this isn't something that there is in Google or Microsoft or something. So if you know if either Google or Microsoft has actual editable JPEG savable calendars that I can do something like this, on which I can do something like this, let me know in the comments. But what we have here is the outline for the month. You will notice across the top of the days of the week, those are listed the poets which will be discussed on the following days. On Sunday, we will have Sylvia Plath discussions. William Blake will be Monday. Edgar Allan Poe will be Tuesdays. Wednesdays will bring us Shakespeare. So with Shakespeare here, we're going to be starting right at the very top. I'm going to be doing, I hesitate to say a read-along for Shakespeare, but I'm going to be doing consecutive sonnets starting with 1 all the way through sonnet 154. This will not be as in-depth, I don't believe, as the Emily Dickinson series that we will be introducing this month. That will be the Emily Dickinson series is something that I've had on my mind for a very long time, but when I started to conceptualize what April 2023 would bring, William Shakespeare is someone I don't think I've ever done an entire day of the week for during these National Poetry Months. So starting at the beginning there is going to be interesting. And I have a little bit of time to maybe work up some type of formula for Shakespeare as well. But the real big deal this month for me is Emily Dickinson. On Thursdays, we will be starting Dickinson Darkly, which will be the series where I will go poem by poem through Emily Dickinson, starting at the very beginning. I have a loose outline in my mind of how I want to do this. So here's the one thing that I beg of you. Pardon me. Pardon me if something falls behind on the Emily Dickinson series. Right now I've got a full-time, I've got a part-time, I'll be doing this, I'll be walking 100 miles this month, walking/running 100 miles this month. So the editing intensive series like Dickinson Darkly that I want to do is going to be a little bit more of a challenge than, say, the Bukowski poems, which are going to be, first off, I love Bukowski. Bukowski speaks to me, so it's something that I'll be able to just sit down and sort of rattle off a Bukowski poetry discussion. The Emily Dickinson Darkly series is something that I want to be way more in-depth than that. On Fridays, we will be with Robert Frost. We're going to take on the next few poems in his collection, New Hampshire. Now, I started New Hampshire 3 years ago now, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago now, going poem by poem through it, but it seems to be, so for me, Robert Frost, and especially the poems that seem to be popping up in New Hampshire, hey, I don't need those all the time. I think they're good, I think they're important, but it's sort of like doing squats at the gym. Yeah, you want to do it. You absolutely want that to be a part of your regimen, but do you want to go and squat every day? No, probably not. Frost is sort of that way for me with poetry, and finally, we will be slumming on Saturdays with Charles Bukowski. So I'm going to go into the poems themselves. On Saturday the 1st, we will read Nirvana by Bukowski, which is actually one of the better-known Bukowskis. It's one of the Bukowskis that is known by name. A lot of Bukowski's poetry not necessarily known by name. I have made this contention time and time again on the channel that Bukowski, what you really want to do is you want to read Bukowski like a novel. You want to sit down with some time for Bukowski, and you want to take it poem by poem as if you're reading a novel, as if you're following a character through something, because that's really what Bukowski's poetry sort of sets up. Now, I've made the case that one of the most alluring things about Bukowski is that Bukowski welcomes you into the world of his poetry in order to judge him, right? As the speaker, we are on some level judging Nasty Chinaski each step of the way. That's one of the charming things about Bukowski's poetry. And because that is so charming, sometimes a lot of the poems aren't necessarily hefty on their own. And then, if you will notice that first Sunday of the month, this is coincidentally the second year in a row that our National Poetry Month discussions will include a celebratory video, the 150th Poetry Discussion. Probably I'm going to set this up a lot like the 100th Poetry Discussion that we had last year, where I just sort of pick a collection of poems and I don't go in depth on a certain thing, but I just sort of share some of my favorites right now. Hopefully that is something that is at least enjoyable on some level. Hopefully that it's not something that's just sort of throwaway. I don't want it to be that. But the 150th Poetry Discussion in the Poetry Discussion playlist here on the channel. Then we have our first Blake poem, Ah, Sunflower, which is definitely written wrong there. Sunflower is hyphenated, and I failed to do that. Again, this is sort of a cumbersome setup for outlining a month, and it's becoming apparent to me now I probably should have used different colors for different poets. That would have been easier to keep it sort of organized visually, but I did not do that. On Tuesday, Edgar Allan Poe had written for us El Dorado, and we will be discussing that. Wednesday begins the journey with William Shakespeare / Billy Wigglestick himself with Sonnet 1, the very first sonnet in the series. So the very first video in the series, the very first sonnet in the series, will go sonnet by sonnet that way. And on Thursday, Awake Ye Muses 9, a poem for which I believe I have a discussion on the channel, but it will be, that poetry discussion is nothing compared to what will be happening in the Dickinson Darkly series. The Dickinson Darkly series, like I said, is something that I have sort of outlined in my head. So again, I beg your pardon if I do not have the time to get full editing done on one of these and end up having to replace it with an actual regular poetry discussion. But on Friday the 7th, we have Frost's Place for a Third. On Saturday the 8th, we have Be Kind from Charles Bukowski, another one of the better-known Charles Bukowski poems. But I would hesitate to call it one of my favorites. On the 9th, we have our first entry from Sylvia Plath on Sunday, The Moon and the Yew Tree. Again, Sylvia Plath is a poet with whom I struggle mightily, someone who does not communicate to me in the same way that Charles Bukowski does. So these Sunday discussions are going to be a struggle for me, but we'll get through that. On Monday the 10th, A Divine Image from Blake. The Blake series is going to be interesting because, kind of like Frost, but even sort of more cantankerous, William Blake is one of these poets that really, I say I can only do a few Frost poems sporadically. I think you should only do sporadic William Blake readings. I think that to do more than that would be probably a touch unhealthy. Lenore on the 11th from Edgar Allan Poe. Again, I haven't done all that much Edgar Allan Poe on the channel. And sort of to open up future plans to you, if I were ever to be able to sort of break more away from the rat race than I am right now, April is National Poetry Month, but May is National Short Story Month. So I would continue if I were ever to break a little bit more away and be able to do 30 poetry discussions followed by the 31 short story discussions. For example, Tuesdays are Edgar Allan Poe. I would just continue Tuesdays through the month of May as well. That would be something interesting to me to be able to do. Sonnet 2 on Wednesday. I'm going to be very honest with you. Sonnet 2 does not ring a bell. I don't remember which one this is. I have read the entire sonnets. A lot of it escapes me at this point, but I have been there before, so we will get through these sonnets together. If you have not made that journey, this is something that is, I hesitate to say transformative for a reader/writer, but I think it's one of those things that you have to do. I'm not going to compare it to a trip to Mecca, for example. It's not that transformative. It's not, I don't believe, that important, but it's one of those things that you've just got to gut up and make your way through. Now, I say gut up because I'm not the biggest fan of Shakespeare. I think that there are a contingency of people that are fans of Shakespeare, but people who are fans of Shakespeare don't normally, at least to my experience, find themselves as fans of, for example, Charles Bukowski. So if you are a fan of Bukowski, being able to talk about Shakespeare makes you a dual threat. And I will note vice versa, even though I don't think that many of the Shakespeare fans would really agree with me. Then we have Dickinson Darkly, There Is Another Sky. Now, one thing I will note here is that Emily Dickinson's poems are arranged in the complete Emily Dickinson collection, roughly what we believe to be in chronological order. So this would be the second poem that we have from Emily Dickinson, at least as far as we believe they are to be put in order. So that is one thing to keep in mind as this series sort of goes along. As we read more and more Emily Dickinson, we will be reading a more and more complex and experienced poet. Then on Friday from Frost, 2 Witches, which I'm surprised that every sort of Robert Frost poem isn't titled something like 2 Witches. Then on Saturday, we get Victory from Charles Bukowski. On Sunday, the 16th, another Sylvia Plath poem that I'm going to struggle with. I'm going to struggle to find something unique, I think, to say about it is Ewer. U''RE. Then from William Blake, Laughing Song. If anything does not sound like a William Blake poem while simultaneously sounding exactly like something detached enough from joy that William Blake would write, Laughing Song is probably it. And then on the 18th from Edgar Allan Poe, Eulalie. Then we have Sonnet 3 from William Shakespeare. Not much to add here. Then Sic Transit Gloria Mundi. I believe I also have a poetry discussion on this poem on the channel, but we will be getting into, again, a much deeper discussion on the Dickinson Darkly series. An Empty Threat from Robert Frost, which, again, sounds crusty enough to be the title of every Robert Frost poem. In the Shadow of the Rose, that's a Bukowski I haven't read, so I am excited to get into that. I just sort of Googled Bukowski poem titles, and that one stuck out to me for some reason. I'm not sure if this is going to be one of the ones that Bukowski actually does something beautiful with, like Bluebird, or if it's going to be another one of these ones where Bukowski just sort of Bukowski's all over the page. On the 23rd, we have Edge from Sylvia Plath. I believe Edge is considered to be maybe the final poem that she ever wrote. The Garden of Love from William Blake on the 24th. The Raven from Edgar Allan Poe on the 25th. Sonnet 4 from William Shakespeare on the 26th. On This Wondrous Sea in the Dickinson Darkly series. And then we get a long and ridiculous title from Robert Frost. A fountain, a bottle, a donkey's ears, and some books. Not real sure what to make of that, but Robert Frost does what Robert Frost does while he's Robert Frosting. On the 29th, a poem for my 43rd birthday. I am approaching my 40th birthday myself, so this is going to be something that is interesting for me to see what it is that another Bukowski poem I haven't read, from what it is that Charles Bukowski is experiencing in his early 40s. So we're going to see where it goes with that. And then finally, on the 30th, Crossing the Water from Sylvia Plath. These will be 30 poetry discussions in 30 days on Stripped Cover Lit. Follow me on my personal channel as well, a link to which can be found in the description below. And by the way, I'm doing poetry every Monday. I know I missed last week. That is the first poetry discussion that I've missed this year. Had a whole lot of things going on. I apologize for that, but we're not going to miss any of these uploads during the month of April, National Poetry Month 2023. So if you have any suggestions, because I have a lot of slots to fill on Mondays going forward this year, be sure to let me know in the comment section below what it is. I've done several poetry discussions so far this year, which were suggested in the comments section. So if you have a favorite poem, a favorite poet, etc., let me know down there. Even if I've already done a poetry discussion on them, I might as well start doubling up on some of these things. There's no purpose for not doing it, especially when I believe truly and wholly that every time you have an experience with literature, because you are a different person, the literature is a different piece of literature as well, even if that piece of literature stays the same. Because if the literature itself stays the same to you, what that does is it transfers you back in time to when that literature meant to you what that literature meant to you. So that is what I have for the TBR for April, announcing National Poetry Month 2023 and what we will be doing going forward. And I do have to finish up a couple chapters in Fairy Tale by Stephen King, so I'm going to do my best to... The novel really fell off for me, so I apologize. I know that a 34-part series is not exactly what anyone is looking for anyway, especially when the book itself, everyone that I've talked to about it sort of will concede the fact that even if they like it, this isn't Stephen King. It's not a Stephen King novel. It's a novel with Stephen King's name on the front. So that is what it is. That is not what I was hoping it would be. And I still have some work to do on that. The review for that, by the way, is going to take me, like I've said a few times, a little bit more time to get through because I really hope to have something special for it. It is something that I am hoping to make I'm not hoping to. I'm going to do this. It is going to be the first Black Label review here on the channel. There's going to be a lot more editing going into it. There's going to be different sections of the review. If you remember the reviews that I've done on the channel, I have 3 good things, 3 bad things, great quotes, literary discussion, rating, and recommendation based on the text. This is going to be a little bit more in-depth than that. There's going to be a little bit more going on than that. I hope that it has a little bit more entertainment value than just me sitting in front of the camera. And is going to be difficult. Like I said earlier in the video, I am a Luddite. This is something with which I struggle. The editing, the labor for the computer part of running a YouTube channel, running a channel about literature, discussions on social media, things like that. These are all things with which I struggle mightily, and I'm trying my hardest right now to figure out a way to make these things work, and I hope to have you here for them. So that is all I have for this, the TBR for the month of April, and join me tomorrow for the very first poetry discussion of the month, of the National Poetry Month 2023, Nirvana by Charles Bukowski.